professor said, his eyes studying the glowing sword. Since you're an augmenter, he continued, I think it's only fair that I let you choose how you want me to fight. Arthur gave him a flat look. Whatever, he replied simply. The professor turned around, slightly offended. Arrogant boy, he thought. He turned back to Arthur with a slight smile. I insist, he said. Please use whatever gives you the most confidence. Very well, the professor replied as he picked up his sword from the ground. Then he drew it quickly and prepared to fight. A blue light flashed on the professor's sword. I'll make sure I'm not too hard on you, he said with a grin. He stepped forward, ready to attack. They clash quickly. The professor strikes hard, but Arthur is able to parry each attack with agility. Arthur twists his body, dodges the attack, and lands a kick on the professor. His eyes narrow. You said not too hard, didn't you? Asked Arthur dryly. The professor tightened his grip on the sword. The blue light in his hand flickered brighter. The professor lunges forward, attacking at high speed. Slash. Arthur parries the attack, but is knocked back slightly by the force of the attack. The professor continues to attack with full force, using mana to strengthen his body and sword. Arthur watches his opponent closely. He's not using any spells, just strengthening his body and sword with mana, he thought. Arthur dodged nimbly. He dodged the professor's attack and countered. Whoosh, who does he think I am? The professor roared in frustration. I'm sure the disciplinary committee isn't just made up of rats who can only dodge and run. The professor's face turned red with anger. Bastard, he thought. As he gathered the mana in his hand, the blue light flashed brighter and brighter. Arthur lunged forward, dodging the professor's attack and preparing to counter. The professor barely dodges. He stares at Arthur in disbelief. Arthur lunges forward, leaving a trail of blue light. The professor cannot keep up with Arthur. This is not a demonstration, Farith commented. Should we call the student council? The fight continues at a fast pace. Arthur moves with increasing agility, dodging each attack and launching sharp counterattacks. Shing, Arthur attacks the professor at high speed. He launches a series of quick attacks, making it difficult for the professor to defend. This boy is getting faster, the professor thought. Arthur bowed slightly. Even rats become deadly when cornered, Professor, he said in a cold tone. Arthur preparing for his final attack. Time to end this, he thought. Crash, the floor beneath Professor Geist cracks, sending him tumbling to the ground below. Arthur's sword is stuck in the ground next to Professor Geist's head. Thank you for your guidance, Arthur said in a flat tone. In the center of the training arena, the professor fell onto his back. Next to his head was a sword with a blue aura. And Arthur with glowing blue eyes stood upright. He wore a black uniform with gold accents. Thank you for your guidance, he said, looking down at the fallen man. The Arthur still stands, his sword now lying beside the body of the man he defeated. In a large classroom, Arthur stands amidst the attention of many people applauding him. Arthur looks back to see Kathleen leaving the classroom after defeating the professor. Farith touches Arthur's shoulder and says, Well done, Arthur. You've shown your talent as my rival. I can't believe you can beat the professor as expected from my rival. Arthur, talking to Farith, thank you. You did well out there too, Farith replied. If you had known the kind of spell the professor used, I'm sure you would have taken precautions. Kathleen looking at Arthur with a flat expression. Arthur continued his conversation with Farith. Of course. I didn't expect him to use such a powerful spell in the demonstration, otherwise I would have won. Kathleen asked Farith, and how would you rate my performance? Arthur continued, I think neglecting your defenses in favor of finishing that last spell was your biggest mistake. Kathleen seemed to nod in agreement. Farith breathed a sigh of relief after giving her assessment. Arthur walks down the corridor with a small white beast on his head. The little white beast calls to Arthur. Papa, Arthur looks sad. Why do you look sad? Asked Sylve, the name of the little white animal. Arthur petted Sylve and replied, It's nothing, Sylve. Arthur is thoughtful. It's just that, since I can't defeat the spirit quickly with just my angel attribute. He continued, I realized I have to work harder to get where I want to be. Arthur walks down the hall to his next class. I'm looking forward to my next class, he thought. He is accompanied by some of his classmates. Arthur arrived at the Fundamentals of Artificiality class. Manipulating and encoding mana into objects for specific uses. Arthur sits on one of the benches in the classroom. We don't have that in my world, he thought. A green-haired girl approached him. Excuse me, is this seat taken? She asked. Arthur replied, if it is, I can sit somewhere else. The green-haired girl looked nervous. No, no one is sitting here yet, he replied. Sit down if you want. Thank you, she said. The girl became even more nervous and spoke quickly. I'm Emily. Nice to meet you, and Arthur seemed surprised at the girl's reaction. What was that? The green-haired girl, Emily, looked panicked. Oh, and my name is Emily Watson, she exclaimed. She continued, can we be friends? I mean, glad to see you. Arthur looked confused. Oh no. He must think I'm weird, Emily thought. Arthur held out his hand to Emily. I'm Arthur, he said. And since this is the first time we've met, how about we start as acquaintances? Emily nodded eagerly. They shook hands. Arthur was surprised to feel Emily's rough hands. That girl works hard, he thought. Emily looks worried. Oh, I'm sorry, she says. It might feel rough, huh? Arthur shows Emily his own hand. No, it's fine, Arthur replies. I have calluses too, see? Emily is impressed. Oh wow, you must have practiced a lot. No wonder you're on the disciplinary committee. I really admire you. As for me, I really like artificials, Emily replied. So I've been tinkering with a lot of gadgets. Unfortunately, it makes my hands pretty rough. Arthur looked at Emily's hands. Really? He asked. I'm kind of jealous that you have such a passion for artificials. Arthur explained, with fighting, the only thing you're good at is destroying and killing. But with artifice, the more advanced you get, the more things you can create, Arthur thought. I never thought of it that way, double quotes, he added, but it's pretty impressive, coming from a 12-year-old. Arthur was surprised. How old was he when he invented that? He thought. Arthur said, well, I have to say, it's an honor to be in the presence of a genius like you. Arthur replied, oh, come on. Emily continued, coming from a mysterious human freshman with no background. A mana beast that looks like a strange fox, and the ability to defeat and destroy not only a professor, but a veteran adventurer in the young yellow core stage. Don't make me laugh. Arthur reassured Emily, don't look so surprised. This is a magic academy. He explained, news travels fast, and gossip travels even faster. Suddenly, the classroom door opens with a bang. A man with curly brown hair, wearing a white lab coat, dramatically enters the classroom. Greetings, commoners, he exclaimed. You may bask in the honor of having me, Professor Gideon, as your teacher for this class. Professor Gideon looks at Arthur. He exclaimed. His face showed exaggerated surprise. Well, if it isn't Arthur Lewin? He adds, I didn't know you were in my class. A large owl with dark green feathers lands on Arthur's shoulder. Sylv looks at the owl suspiciously. Papa, he cried, it's dangerous. Professor Gideon tells Arthur that Principal Goodsky called him. Whoa, looks like Principal Goodsky called you, he says. I guess you won't get to hear the rest of my life-changing lecture today. Get lost, boy, Emily said to Arthur, see? I told you news travels fast. As Arthur walks down the corridor with Boo, the big owl, and Sylv, Kathleen appears. How long are you two going to keep fighting? She asks. Arthur greets Kathleen. Oh, hi Kath. Kathleen slams the door in Arthur's face. Arthur stared at the closed door. This is not a good sign, he thought. Arthur knocks on the door of Director Goodsky's office. Did you call for me, Principal Goodsky? He asked. Arthur saw Warden Goodsky sitting at his desk with a serious expression on his face. Damn, he looks angry, he thought. Director Goodsky said, please have a seat. Arthur sat down in the chair in front of Principal Goodsky's desk. He looks nervous. Arthur said, "Look, if this is about my fight with Professor Geist, I only did it because he was using." Director Goodsky cut him off. "I didn't call you here because of your dealings with Professor Geist." Arthur looked surprised. Then ... double quotes. Director Goodsky asked, "Then what?" He continued, "How about acting as a temporary professor for your practical mana manipulation class?" Principal Goodsky smiled as he looked at Arthur. A gray-haired woman sits on the sofa. Arthur lost in thought. She has been offered to be a substitute professor for a practical course in mana manipulation. Cynthia seems to be talking to Arthur. Cynthia asked, "Is someone behind me?" The redhead replied, "I am talking to you, my dear." The redhead then asked, "What exactly did Kathleen tell you to make things this way?" Cynthia smiled and asked, "Now that we've called Princess Dicathin by her first name, yes?" Show Arthur's imagination. He imagines the chaotic scene that would ensue if he approached the two princesses. Arthur then said, "Don't joke about such things." Arthur asks if he can be a student and a professor at the same time. Cynthia replied, "Take it easy." "Nothing to worry about," she continued. "It's really quite simple, as long as I say so, yes." Cynthia explained that there were cases of highly qualified upperclassmen teaching undergraduate courses, and that Arthur was not special. Arthur then asks about Professor Geist. The Cynthia explained that Professor Geist had been dismissed from the academy after an investigation into Princess Kathleen's allegations. Arthur was surprised to hear that Kathleen was so upset. He then asked the director why he was doing all this. The director explained that he offered Arthur the position because there was a vacancy and he thought it would be a good opportunity for Arthur to build his reputation. He also added that he could defend Arthur if necessary. Arthur is still suspicious and asks about the parents' reaction. The principal replies that he is the principal and his decision is final. He adds that teaching will be more beneficial to Arthur than just sitting in class. Arthur finally agrees. The principal smiles and believes that Arthur will do a good job. The principal asks his pet owl, Avier, what he thinks of Arthur. Avier replies that Arthur is different. The director then reflects that Arthur has great mental acuity and emotional maturity. He warns Avier not to think of Arthur as a child and explains that Arthur could be their greatest ally or their worst enemy. Arthur meets his friend and roommate Elijah and meets Charlotte. Elijah and Arthur joke about their classes. Charlotte tells him about her fun class. Elijah compliments Charlotte on her skills in the chain casting class. Charlotte blushes. Elijah asks how Arthur's class went. Arthur says that he ended up being the substitute professor for the class, much to Elijah's surprise. Elijah says he wants to see Arthur teach and takes Arthur and Charlotte shopping. Charlotte and Elijah invite Arthur to join them, but Arthur declines as he has to attend class. Elijah and Charlotte then make plans to go shopping together, but Charlotte suddenly cancels, admitting that she forgot that she had other plans. Elijah is disappointed, but Arthur encourages him and asks if he has a chance with Charlotte. Arthur replies that Elijah can do better. Arthur goes to a senior class and becomes the center of attention. Some of his friends from other classes are surprised to see him there. Arthur meets with his friends from the discipline committee, including Curtis and Kathleen. Kathleen warns Arthur not to embarrass the committee. Arthur promises to do his best. They meet Tesha and Arthur greets her enthusiastically. Arthur is annoyed by Claire's actions. Tesha looks upset and reacts coldly to Arthur. Claire comments that Tesha is in a bad mood because of Arthur. Lucas walks by and Arthur just looks at him very annoyed.